I'll put my hand up to say I fall into the trap of just being a bit of an email checker, and I have to be very, very disciplined and intentional with these technologies. So can you give us a bit of an overview of how we can use technology for our advantage and not let it use us?
The stuff that I see with social media and kids is playing out in the corporate workplace with email and Microsoft Teams and the way people use it. They're not in control of their inboxes quite often. Their inboxes are in control of them.
It's the inbox. That's what sucks the most time when I speak to corporate executives. Georgie, my inbox is just out of control. Can we just start there? Because I think a lot of people struggle with this.
I would say the three biggest cultural issues around productivity in most organizations will be, number one, your email culture and the volume of email that people have to wade through every day. Number two, your meeting culture and the amount of time that people are expected to be in meetings on a day-to-day basis. And number three,
Dermot, welcome to the Career Confidence Podcast. I am really excited to get into today's topic. We're going to be talking all about high performance teams, productivity. But before we get stuck into all the really great stuff that we're going to talk about today, can you set the scene for us and give us a bit of an intro into yourself and your own career journey? So over to you.
Sure. Hi, Georgie. So, look, I've been involved in the productivity training space for about 25 years now. So when I first started training around performance and productivity, there was no technology at that point in time. We were using paper diary systems to organize ourselves, but I fell in love with the whole idea of helping people to be more organized. But then my real passion grew when technology did come into the equation. So, in the mid-90s, we started using computers more. Email certainly came into the workplace, and we started using tools like Microsoft Outlook, and later on, Gmail came along. And that's what really ignited my passion, because for me, there was no point teaching people how to use paper diary systems anymore when there was far more powerful tools at our fingertips. And yet back then, most people in my experience were not using tools like Outlook as proper planning tools. They were really just big inboxes with a calendar stuck in the side of them as an afterthought. So that's really where I built my business about productivity. 22 years ago, I started that with the idea of bringing the theory of productivity together with the technology and showing people how to leverage these tools to work more effectively. Now, of course, it's not all about the technology. We need to think about our mindsets, and we need to think about the habits and the routines that we build for ourselves. But I think the secret of my success is that idea of linking the strategies with the technology and therefore helping people to implement new behaviors using the tools that they're using anyway on a day-to-day basis.
Fantastic. So you've mentioned there, obviously, technology, and I grew up with a pen and paper as well. So, I do remember the days where I'd write everything down, but, then I remember obviously having the computer, and then obviously email came about. But I do think technology has absolutely increased productivity. However, I also think there's a slight dark side to it as well. And I'll put my hand up to say I fall into the trap of just being a bit of an email checker. Social media zaps my time as well. And I have to be very, very disciplined and intentional with these technologies. So can you give us a bit of a, overview of how we can use technology for our advantage and not let it use us?
So I think it's very much about control. Who's in control? If the technology is in control of you, then it's going to have a dark side if you're in control of it. And I think the word you used was intentionality. I think that's a really great word, because it is about getting the most out of these tools, but using them in a very intentional way. Just like we see with kids these days, they've all got their phones, they've got social media, and it's fantastic when it comes to a learning point of view and just access to information, but it's obviously got a real dark side But if we can teach the kids to use that technology in a more intentional way, then they can get the most out of them. Same with adults. And the stuff that I see with social media and kids is playing out in the corporate workplace with email and Microsoft Teams and, the way people use it. They're not in control of their inboxes quite often. Their inboxes are in control of them. They're not even in control of their schedules. Their schedules are in control of them. So I reckon that we need to take back control and be much more intentional with how we work.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I was reading some stats the other day that people are actually getting hundreds of emails a day. I mean, I was just like, wow. And I think on my busy days, I'll receive anywhere between 100, 200 emails. How do we start? Is there some sort of process or tools that we can use just to sort of because it's the inbox. That's what sucks the most time when I speak to corporate executives. Georgie, my inbox is just out of control. Can we just start there? Because I think a lot of people struggle with this.
Yeah, so look, for many years, I've been focusing on productivity from a personal productivity point of view. And, I believe that most people need to upgrade their skills around how they organize their schedule and their priorities and how they manage the incoming work like emails and other inputs into their world, and also how they achieve their outcomes and stay focused on what's most important in their roles. So for me, from a personal productivity point of view, they're the three keystones. It's what I call actions, inputs, and outcomes. But one of the things that I realized a number of years ago was that the individual can only do so much. And one of my frustrations was I was training a lot of people how to manage their inbox more effectively, and they loved it. It was revolutionary for them. It was like a weight coming off their shoulders. But then those people were going back into a workplace that just killed their productivity all over again, because productivity is also a cultural problem. And I would say the three biggest cultural issues around productivity in most organizations will be, number one, your email culture and the volume of email that people have to wade through every day. Number two, your meeting culture and the amount of time that people are expected to be in meetings on a day-to-day basis. And number three, your prioritization culture, if it is heavily stacked towards urgency dominating versus people being able to work on what is most important. So after many years of working in the personal productivity space, I still certainly do a lot of that, but I put my attention to productivity cultures in organizations. And I reckon that's ultimately what we need to look at. We need to teach people good personal productivity skills and habits around how they manage their own inbox and their own email. But if we really want to create a sustained change, organizations need to address their productivity culture around email, and they need to reduce the volume of unnecessary communications if they want to give their people a fighting chance of being able to stay on top of it all. So I reckon it's about looking at both sides of that coin. But when it comes to your own personal productivity, again, it's about getting in control of your inbox. Your inbox is a delivery dock for new work coming in. It is not a storeroom for old emails. So you should never use your inbox as your filing system, in my opinion. By all means, keep emails and file them, but keep your inbox clear of old emails that don't need to be there anymore. And secondly, your inbox is not a to-do list. It shouldn't be used as a way of trying to remember all of the actions that are buried in your inbox. You need a better system than just, marking emails on red or flagging emails in the inbox. That's what most people do, but I believe it's a highly ineffective way of working. So if you can address those issues and treat your inbox as a proper delivery dock for new work, and your job is to make decisions about those incoming pieces of information and get rid of as much of the noise as possible, but then action the things that truly need your attention in an appropriate way, then you start to get in control of the incoming work.
Right, I absolutely love this. And as you were speaking, I was smiling to myself because I thought, oh yeah, I've flagged a few things, just sort of starred a few things and got then completely overwhelmed by it all. So look, what does actually good, let's talk about personal productivity first, and I'd love to go into more of that cultural productivity. But when we think about personal productivity, what can someone actually do? What's a better filing system than just being it all in our inbox?
Yeah. So I think the trick is, for those people who do tend to keep everything in their inbox, there is a method to their madness. And the benefit of them leaving everything in their inbox is it's highly efficient. You don't have to move things to 57 different folders. You can just leave them there, and it's much more efficient than filing things in lots of folders. But the downside is you're muddying the waters, because your delivery dock is also your storage space, is also your prioritization system and action management system. So it gets very confused, and the actions get lost in all of that. So I think we need to take the good piece of people leaving stuff in their inbox, i.e. having a simple, efficient filing system, but we need to separate out the inbox from the filing system. So I was born in Ireland, in Dublin, and being raised Catholic Irish, we fiercely believe in the separation of church and state, and I also believe in the separation of your inbox and your filing system. They serve different purposes. So to that end, for many, many years, I have used one filing folder where I keep everything that I need to keep. That is it. If I don't want to keep an email, I will happily delete it. But if I do want to keep an email, and believe me, I keep a lot of emails just in case I might need to refer to them again, I put them into my archive folder in Microsoft Outlook, or if you're using Gmail, you could just use the archive or set up a filing folder. It doesn't really matter, but it's a separate folder to my inbox. So my inbox is my delivery dock for work coming in. My archive folder is where I keep emails that I want to keep that I have received. And then my sent items is where I keep emails that I have sent. Those three folders pretty much make up my system for managing emails, with the one exception. And that exception is the place where I manage email actions. So there are emails that come into my inbox that I can deal with quickly. There's many emails that come into my inbox that don't need any action whatsoever. They just need to be deleted or filed. But there are other emails that require some action from me, and they're things that I have decided are a good use of my time, but I don't necessarily need to do them immediately, or I'm not in the position to do them immediately. And they're the things that I try and lift out of the inbox and either put into my calendar or into my task management system to remember to deal with those in a timely and appropriate way. And whether you're using Microsoft Outlook or Gmail, in both cases, you can literally press a button and convert an email into a task, or schedule an email into your calendar, so that you've got it in a time management system, so you can manage it as one of your priorities along with your other work. And the email will come with the activity, so you've got everything at your fingertips when you need it. And for that reason, I don't need to leave the email in my inbox anymore. I can happily file it, knowing that I won't forget to do it because it's been scheduled into my task list or into my calendar. This is the way these tools were designed to be used 25 years ago, and yet most people just never, I suppose, got taught to use them in the way they were designed to be used.
Mm. Yeah, look, that's absolutely fantastic advice. And I think one saying I have, what doesn't get scheduled doesn't get done. So in my Google Calendar now, I am a lot more organized in terms of like, okay, this is when I'm doing podcast prep. This is when I'm doing interview prep. This is when I'm doing this task. And I've almost started to like color coordinate it now as well. I've gone to the next level. But it's taken a while. It has taken a while. And I loved what you said then about the mindset piece about all of this as well, because all I know with myself, and I'm sure a lot of like people listening to this would agree on, is that when I'm more organized, I feel so much calmer about going into the week. When I get overwhelmed, it's when I haven't scheduled anything in and I think about, oh God, I need to do that. I need to do that. I need to do that. But as soon as it's in my diary, I go, cool, that's when I'm getting around to that. Sure. So can we talk about the whole cultural productivity? Because there's not probably a meeting that I have with a hiring manager or some like a leader in general where they want to improve their team's productivity, but they don't want to also overwhelm them as well. So what does good cultural productivity actually look like, in your opinion?
Yeah, great question. So I really believe that productivity is a leadership issue. And often it's not seen as that. I recently published a book called Lead Smart, and it was very much aimed at that leadership level, because my frustration working in a lot of large corporates was the fact that quite often leaders organize training for their teams around productivity, but they didn't necessarily partake in that training themselves. They were often too busy to attend, or there was a sense that, look, I'm pretty organized because I'm a senior leader, and you have to be really organized to be a senior leader. But that's actually not true. Most leaders that I work with, their level of productivity is high because of necessity, but it's not high enough. And often, I'm working with leaders who, again, are being bombarded by hundreds of emails every day, but they're also in meetings most of the time. And they're not getting as much control or balance into their schedule as they should. So, they often, when they're honest with me, they'll say, I sometimes feel like I'm a leader, but I'm actually too busy to lead because I'm just caught up in this treadmill of busyness and urgency and emails and overwhelm. So I reckon that leaders need to be more productive themselves, but they actually need to be the ones that are leading the productive cultures within their team. And that means they need to be leading by example. So you don't want to be talking to your team about having a better email culture, and yet the leader is the one who's knocking out emails at 11 o'clock at night and, not setting a good example. Or the leader is the one sending emails, expecting things at the very last minute and saying, I need this tomorrow morning because I've got a meeting with, the client tomorrow afternoon. So there's a lot of poor behaviors that are demonstrated by leaders. And, there's doctors and surgeons would take what's called the doctor's creed. And it basically in Latin says, do no harm. I reckon leaders need to take that on when it comes to productivity. First of all, do no harm. Do not be the one that's causing productivity friction for your team. But I think leaders need to go one step beyond that and really take productivity as an issue that they need to really put on the agenda for their team. But it's not complicated. I mentioned 3 productivity cultures that I tend to focus on. Your email or communication culture is one, your meeting culture is a second, and your prioritization culture is a third. I reckon that the thing that can shift productivity in the long term and create a sustained change to the productivity of the team is to create a set of team agreements that the team all buy into and all hold each other to account on. And what I'm talking about is, if you just took the email of, the issue of email as one of the cultures, if a team is to sit down and really think about what is creating all the noise that we experience, and usually it's going to be common things like we just overuse email to begin with. We copy each other in on too many things unnecessarily. Mm-hmm. We have too many reply all conversations without, first of all, really thinking about, does everyone in the group need to hear what I have to say, or should I be just sending an email to the originator? We send too many thank you emails and we're trying to be nice and supportive, but actually we're just creating noise quite often. If a team is to sit down and have a talk about what is actually creating the noise and then come up with literally 3 to 5 agreed behaviors around email usage, and then put those on a single sheet of paper and said, okay, this is our team email agreement document. that would go a long way to getting everyone on the same page, if you like, and giving people something to hold themselves to account on, but also giving them permission to hold other people to account. And when we are creating too much noise, to be able to say, hey, guys, we said that we'd use email a bit differently. Let's have a think about that.
Yeah, that is so, so powerful. And it all comes back to that whole communication piece, just being like getting people to sit down in a room and be like, let's sort of set these expectations now. Let's all be on the same page. But I think that's such powerful advice for any team and any leader to execute on. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. But one other hot topic that is being spoken about a lot in the sort of the markets that I'm sort of working on is the whole work from home. And some people say productivity has gone up and other people say productivity has gone down. What's your take on the whole working from home debate? Do you think it's been a positive thing for productivity or a negative thing, or maybe somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, look, I think that this can be, down to the individual and down to the culture of the organization or the culture of the team as well. My sense, and I don't have any research around this, but I'm obviously working with teams every day in different organizations that have different policies around work from home and how that's all managed. My sense is that overall productivity has increased or at least stayed the same. I think that individuals probably feel that when they're allowed to work from home, they are actually more productive. So I met someone on the beach the other day. We were walking the dog and we just got talking and she was saying, I've moved up the coast and I live here since COVID. And she said, my productivity has really increased because I've got much more balance and I'm very self-driven and self-motivated. So I'm absolutely more productive. Now, I guess the question in my mind is, if I was to talk to her boss, would they have the same opinion? I don't know the answer to that question, but certainly the individuals that I talk to that are allowed to work partially or totally from home certainly feel that they are more productive. I have a very strong belief in human nature, and I believe that most people are honest and most people want to do great work, and they put in a situation where they are driven, if you like, in a home setting or an off-site setting. I think for the most part, people are going to do the right thing and be productive, even though they might be doing it in a more balanced way. But what we need to remember is that before COVID hit, and COVID was the thing that drove this whole conversation, the balance was too far the other way, because the expectation on people was that you work long hours, and the expectation might be that you're in meetings most of the day, and then when your last meeting finishes at 5:30, then you spend another hour or two trying to catch up on 200 emails, and then you might go home and have dinner with the kids, but then you get the laptop out to try and do your real priorities. That is not balanced and productive. So if the pendulum has swung a bit more over to the actual individual, I'm okay with that, because when people are more relaxed, when people are more balanced, they are going to do better work every day of the week. I truly believe that.
I completely agree with you. And I know that even before COVID, I was always a big advocate for working from home. And I think you get less distractions. You can just get in the zone, get your head down, do the work without the things, people interrupting. I think from a cultural perspective, that whole collaboration piece, I understand why certain leaders would love their teams in the office 1 or 2 days a week for that sort of work, that sort of face-to-face interaction. I totally can understand that. But I think when it comes to productivity and working from home, when people say to me, oh, we've lost productivity, I don't think it's a productivity issue. I think it's a disengagement issue. I think some people have just lost, I don't know, maybe the motivation or the interest. And I think then that's kind of like a cultural leadership issue. So if a leader's listening to this right now and they can go, no, honestly, my team they're not engaged. There's not much productivity happening. Any advice for that leader to try and turn that around? Where would you start if you do have like a underperforming team?
So, obviously underperformance could be caused by many, many things, but purely from a productivity perspective, I reckon that one of the things that can lead to disengagement is when people are just overwhelmed and they are working in unproductive cultures. It can really be frustrating for people. So, obviously someone's going to be more disengaged when they're trying to wade through 200 emails a day and they know that a lot of that is just noise. That is, they kind of want to get to their real work, but they have to wade through all of this stuff in order to get to it. If people are in a situation where they are in meetings most of the day and most of the week, and they have what I would call a very compressed schedule, I reckon that can be very overwhelming because, again, they want to get to their priorities, but they have no time to get to them. Therefore, they're having to do their priorities at night or on the weekend, which is one of the things that feeds into disengagement. And I would also say that urgency is a massive killer of productivity and of people's engagement. So a few years ago, I wrote a book called Urgent, and the premise of that book, it was inspired from spending a week at Harvard doing an in-house course with Professor Ron Heffitz. And my realization there was, I talk about urgency all the time. It's a massive issue in organizations, but I never quite understood or could find a way of being able to talk to organizations and leadership about how they should dial down the urgency. Because the problem I had was, when I said to leaders, you need to dial down the urgency, they go, well, hold on. We need our people to work with pace. We need them moving things forward because it's a fast-paced business. And I guess the insight that I got with Professor Ron Heffitz was the idea that what we need to do is we need to slow down to speed up. So your people will actually get more done, and they will get it done to a better level of quality if they aren't constantly being pushed into a space of what I would call acute and chronic urgency. So I reckon that we are going to be very disengaged if we are coming in every single day and we are just waiting for the next urgent crisis, the next urgent priority to be pushed onto my desk, and all of the things that I had planned to work on today get completely sidelined because I now need to deal with this urgent issue. And the truth of it is, a lot of urgency in today's workplace is either fake, so it's things that aren't really urgent, but people are making them seem urgent, or unreasonable. And what I mean by that is there's a certain amount of urgency that comes from having a deadline, but the work not being managed in the right way, and it gets left in an inbox or in a pile somewhere, and it begins to drift and drift and drift until it finally becomes urgent, and that's when it then gets emailed to me, and I have to deal with the urgency of it because you didn't manage it in your own inbox a week ago. So you said earlier on, your saying was, if it's not scheduled, it doesn't get done. Well, I would give a slight nuance to that and say if it's not scheduled, it doesn't get done until the last minute, and then it becomes an urgent crisis that somebody has to manage. So that's why, for me, using your calendar and your task list to be able to schedule work for today or tomorrow or later this week or next week, but actually creating what I would call a proactive schedule of your work over the next week or two is a really critical personal productivity strategy to help you to work on things in a timely way and not leave them till the last minute. Marking an email in your inbox unread so you don't forget to go back and deal with it. The risk there is that it gets pushed down below your screen and then it becomes urgent, and it's only when someone's chasing you up that you go, oh, I've got to do that now, and suddenly it's an urgent issue. So We need to schedule our work and manage those priorities intentionally. That's a personal productivity solution. But a cultural solution, again, is for leaders to talk about the causes of urgency in their team. And number one, again, set up a set of team agreements around how we deal with urgency and how we prioritize our work. But number two, give people permission to respectfully negotiate urgency and be able to open up respectful conversations to say, is this urgent? Is this truly urgent? Why is this urgent? What could we do differently next time so that we're not constantly giving each other urgent work that is just disrupting our best laid plans?
That's just such solid advice. And I think it comes back to being more proactive than reactive. And I reflect on my own career, Dermot, and if I'm truly honest, so I'm in sales, right? So I'm in recruitment. There's not a day that goes by that there's not an email that pops up that I could say, that's really urgent. I need to action that right now. And everything I've got planned in my schedule would just, that I'll deal with that later on. But I've really had to discipline myself and like you said, then put boundaries in place of what actually is urgent, what actually has to be actioned right there and then versus what can be then just, I've got this task that I need to complete right now. This is my priority. That urgent thing can wait a couple of hours and I'll get to it once I completed this. But it's been a journey for me because I think, especially when it's in sales, it is fast paced. You've got calls coming in at you, you're recruiting, dealing with lots of different people. There's lots of stuff that's always happening. And I've just really had to have these boundaries in place. So I love what you're saying. And I love that, you're encouraging people to speak about this and really refine what does urgent actually mean, because then we're all on the same page to go, oh no, this is actually urgent. This does need to be executed right now. And then there's no issues that come up in the workplace or no problems when it comes to management issues and things. So it's really good.
And look, you're never going to get rid of urgency, and nor should you, because urgency does play an important role in creating momentum. And you know yourself, sometimes you do your best work at the last minute. But the key is not to become addicted to that kind of adrenaline rush. But I reckon that the simple thing that people could do, especially leaders, is to see urgency as one lens that you can look at your work through, but importance is a second lens. And I reckon that we need to be looking at our work through both lenses. But the trick is to get the sequence right. So ideally, you should be looking at your work, first of all, through the importance lens, and then look at it through the urgency lens. And that's the opposite to what most people do. In most organizations I work in, urgency has actually become the default method of prioritization, because the question people ask is, how urgent is this? If it's really urgent, they deal with it straight away. If it's not urgent, they stick it in the pile for later. But when you create a mindset and a culture where people actually look at things through the importance lens and say, how good a use of my time is this? How valuable is this to what I'm trying to achieve in my role or within the team or within the organization? If that's always their first filter, and then once they've established, now this is a good use of my time, then they can work out, okay, what's the urgency? Is this something that I truly need to drop everything and deal with it right now? Or could this wait a couple of hours until I finish concentrating on the deep work that I'm concentrating on? Or is that something that I could do tomorrow or later on this week or even next week? I reckon as long as we're managing people's expectations appropriately. So, one of the strategies I'll often use is a strategy that I call shush. And I tell people to shush all the time, and I use this with clients. I use it with very senior clients. I love to tell them to shush. It's fantastic. Now, you'd be glad to know shush is an acronym. And it kind of goes like this. Let's say I was in the middle of a busy day with meetings and training and coaching, whatever it might be, but I get an email from a client requesting that I send them some available dates and some costings around some training for their team. The first S in shush stands for I will send a timely response. So I'll usually send an acknowledgement within a couple of hours of receiving that, if possible, certainly same day. But I don't do the work. I send the acknowledgement, and the second S is I set an expectation about when I might be able to deal with that. So I might say, hey, Georgie, I saw your email and I'm just delivering training today, but I'll send you something tomorrow when I'm back in the office. So I set a reasonable expectation about when I could do the work. The third S stands for I then schedule the action into my task list or my calendar so I don't forget to do it. And then the H in Shush stands for I hold myself accountable to that. I either deliver as promised, or if I can't, I put my hand up and I might send you another email to say, look, something's come up. I'm not going to be able to get this to you until Friday. Is that going to be okay? Now, I reckon if we all did that more, we would reduce the amount of anxiety that's out there. Because often when someone sends you an email, your inbox is a black hole and they don't know if you've seen it, if you're going to see it, if you're going to action it, if it's been forgotten about. So by doing the shush, I'm just managing the expectations and I'm making them calm down and say, yeah, I've got it. And you can depend on me. I'll either deliver or at least I'll put my hand up and renegotiate.
That's fantastic, because the amount of emails that I send sometimes, I go, oh, did they get it? Oh my God, is there an issue? And I get in my own head. And then like 2 hours later, I'm sending them another email and probably really overwhelming them, because I'm just like, just get back to me. Just acknowledge that you've seen the email. Thanks so much, Georgie. I am super busy at the moment, but let me get back to you by close business tomorrow on this. That would be amazing. If I could get a response like that every time. Fantastic. And I think then as the person, you feel calmer because you've acknowledged, you don't feel rude. Like, and if we could communicate this way in our work, like you said, I think it would eliminate a lot of anxiety and stress in the workplace. Absolutely. So that's fantastic advice. Look, I want to get on to how people can work smarter, not harder, because there's not a conversation that I'm having right now that doesn't also include some form of stress, mental health, overwhelm, burnout. I do think that people are feeling a bit overwhelmed at times and burnt out, and, lots of different priorities inside and outside of work. So how can people work smarter, not harder, and just not be working until 11 o'clock at night, like you said, checking their emails, sending emails? Like, it's not sustainable. It's the fast track to burnout. So how can we avoid that?
Yeah. So look, we've already talked about things like, getting in control of your inbox. That's obviously going to reduce the overwhelm if you feel like you're in control of it and it's not controlling you. I've mentioned the idea of using your calendar and your task list as a way of organizing what you need to do and making sure that you're being intentional about the priorities that you need to work on. So I believe that having a good system in place that allows you to bring both your meeting workload and your task workload together is crucial. So we need to manage our time holistically. And the mistake I see a lot of people making if they're using a tool like Microsoft Outlook or Google Calendar is they put all of their meetings into their calendar, which is great. So they've got a centralized system for all of their meeting workload. But then their priorities and the task load is all over the place. Some of those are in their inbox, and some of them are in their meeting notebook, and some of them are in their to-do list, and some of them are in their head, and it's a bit all over the place. So the first suggestion for working smarter, not harder, is to set up a system so that you've got both your meeting workload and your task workload in the one place so that you can see all of that work holistically. And again, both Outlook and Gmail are designed to allow you to see your task workload in your calendar and be able to manage your task list and manage your meetings. Because whether it's a meeting or a task, it needs your time to get done. So we need a time management system that is holistic in nature. So that's the first thing. And then we need to build good habits around prioritization and planning. So we've talked a little bit about prioritization, that idea of importance and urgency being lenses that you can look at your work through. But I reckon the thing that is missing for a lot of people is personal planning. So each day having a routine where you build an intentional plan of action for yourself. So I try to start each day by spending a few minutes, literally, 10 minutes max, getting really focused on what do I need to get done today. And my daily plan is made up of, on one side, my meeting commitments for the day, but on the other side, my task list for the day. So every day I've got a clear, achievable, intentional list of priorities that I want to get done. My task list is not just a list of everything that I need to do. It's actually a list of, these are the 8 things that I want to try and get done today, or these are the 10 things, or these are the 3 things. It depends on my meeting workload for the day, and it depends on what's in my list. And within my task list for the day, I always try to identify the 3 to 5 things that I'm absolutely going to fight for. So, I might have a dozen things on my list for today, but I will identify the top 3 to 5 things. And I usually highlight them in a different way. Like, Georgie, you were saying that you loved your paper tools and your to-do list, writing those things down. You probably had some sort of a highlighting strategy where you got a highlighter pen and you highlighted the really critical things, or you put a star beside the really critical things. I just do that electronically. My task list in Outlook is able to highlight the high priorities in a different color. So I'm able to see them clearly, and they're my must-do priorities for the day. The other things, they're more discretionary. If I don't get them done, no big deal. They could roll over to tomorrow. So daily planning is really key for focus. And then weekly planning is really key for perspective. So I reckon that we need to kind of zoom out of our schedule on a regular basis and look beyond the day. We need to think about not just getting next week organized, but we need to think about what's coming up over the next few weeks. What do I need to start being proactive around? Well, what deadlines do I have looming in a few weeks' time that I need to now start scheduling activities into my system so that I can meet those deadlines appropriately? And we also need to spend some time each week thinking about the bigger picture. So, it's not enough to get your inbox down to 0. That's just scheduling everyone else's priorities into your system. You also need to think about, what are your priorities? So if you think about your key stakeholders, if you think about your goals and objectives, if you think about the projects that you're trying to drive forward, what are the next step actions that drop out of those that should be going into your calendar or your task list? And this is the thing that people often don't send you an email about those things. You need to be the one driving those into your own schedule. And that's why a good weekly planning process is really key. But my experience is most people are too busy. They feel like, I'm so overwhelmed, I've got so much on that I just need to get stuck into it and plow through as much as I can. But actually, if they were to stop and spend 45 minutes on a Friday planning the week properly, they'd actually feel more in control, but they'd actually get a lot more work done as well.
I completely agree. And I think for me, if I reflect on my own productivity journey, it's having that clarity of mind. I think that when I was going through a really, very busy period, but it was like I was busy being busy. I used to sort of like have it as a bit of a badge of honor. Like people say, "Oh, how you do?" I'm so busy. I'm so busy. But I was just a busy fool. Like I didn't really have any structure to my day. I was very reactive. I was very much like, putting out fires every day. And now I think because I've saw a lot of clarity around what are my goals, where do I see myself in a year or two's time, and breaking those sort of, I guess, goals down into small steps that enables me to prioritize what's going to move me closer towards my goal and what would move me away from my goal. And just having that mindset every single week, coming into a fresh new week, looking at my calendar, being like, is there enough priorities in here that are actually moving me forward versus distractions and taking away my focus? And I think clarity is king. I really do when it comes to a lot of goal setting and productivity. It has been for myself anyway, but you are the expert in this space, Dermot. Like, how do you set up your week? Like I always think we can learn things from people who are just the experts in this space. So, you've mentioned you look at, you zoom out, look at your week, but how do you structure your week and how does a typical week look like for you?
So the first thing I would suggest, and it's something that is really, really critical for me, is balance. So I guess one of the biggest issues that I deal with on the senior leadership level is a lack of balance in people's schedules. Leaders give way too much of their time away to meetings, and they don't protect enough time to get their priorities done or to just build in time for planning or for processing of emails or even to be available to their team when their team needs to bounce things off them. So that's one of the balances that I think is really critical. So I fiercely try to protect 50% of my core working hours, and I will happily give 50% of my core working hours to meetings, but I will fiercely protect the other 50% for getting everything else done that I need to get done. And my belief is if you want to achieve work-life balance, you first of all need to achieve work-work balance. And that's the work-work balance for me. You see, too many executives, what they do is they give their whole week over to meetings, and then they've got no time for the emails, they've got no time for their own priorities. But no, they do have time for those things. It just happens to be at night or on the weekend, which is not work-life balance. So I get a lot done, and I don't work long hours. I work very, very respectable hours, and I'm able to switch off. I'm able to enjoy time with my family. I'm able to engage with the things that recharge me because I get all of my work done during core working hours, but I'm hugely focused on what's important in there. So for me, balance is the first thing. You mentioned clarity and being clear about what's important. That for me is I totally agree with that and mirror that. When I'm working with leaders, I often talk about a concept that I came across in a book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And one of the commitments this book talked about was the commitment to working above the line and not working below the line. Now, they were talking about that concept in a very different context to what I would talk about it in. But when it comes to productivity, I think that's such a simple but powerful framework that you are either working above the line or you're working below the line. When you're above the line, you're working on the things that are truly a good use of your time. When you're working down below the line, you've been busy, but you're not necessarily adding a lot of value. So I try to be ruthless about working above the line. And I'm very clear about my swim lane. So I hear this language being used in a number of organizations where we talk about lanes or swim lanes. I kind of think about my work in 4 lanes, if you like, and this is in my personal role. I have 4 lanes, which are think, sell, deliver, and team. So if I'm not thinking about productivity, and by that I mean coming up with concepts, writing books, developing the thought leadership around productivity, if I'm not doing that, I'm not doing my job. That's one of my lanes. When it comes to selling, like you, I'm the salesperson within our business, and I need to make sure that I've got a reasonable amount of sales meetings in my calendar each week. Delivery is the thing I get paid to do. So when I'm, delivering training or a keynote at a conference, that's the work that I get paid to do. So I need to make sure there's a reasonable balance of that in my schedule. And then, of course, I've got a team of people that I'm leading. So I need to make sure that I'm developing them and I'm enabling them to do the rest of the work. So when I think about those 4 lanes, and then I overlay on that the above the line, below the line, I find that a really useful way to really get to the essence of what is above the line in each of those 4 lanes. That is the stuff in your role that you really need to fight for, and you really need to make sure you've got a good volume of that in your calendar and in your task list for the week. That's an exercise that I really think is worth people doing if they want to get clarity. And all you need is an A3 sheet of paper, a big sheet of paper, and draw your 4 or 5 lanes or 3 lanes, whatever makes sense for you, and then draw a line in the middle and just make a list and say, what's above the line for me in each of those lanes? So that's the stuff that I would like to spend more time on. But what's below the line? What are the sort of things that might be in my lanes, but they're kind of not the best use of my time? And when you list those out, that's the beginning of clarity, which allows you to make some decisions about how you could either get rid of those activities or at least minimize the time that you spend on those activities.
I think that activity is one of the most profound activities I've heard on productivity. I absolutely love it. I've heard something before about the pillars, the pillars in your job, but I love the lanes. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I read a really good book recently, and forgive me, I think the author's, I can't remember his last name, it's Dan something, but it was like called about Buy Back Your Time. And it was this concept of identify the key areas that you could delegate and buy back your time. So when I'm now coming to hiring, I'm thinking, how can I buy back my time as opposed to just add someone into my business that could actually take one of my lanes away because I'm spending more time training or more time, explaining this to them. So it's all sort of coming together in this podcast for me. So thank you. It's been really, really good. But look, what's next for you, Dermot? Like, what are you working on right now? And, have you got another book that you're working on or anything coming up that we can look forward to?
Well, look, I feel like a little bit like J.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings, where I've kind of come to the end of my trilogy. So I've written a few books over the years, but the trilogy for me were, I'll show you that, Smart Work, which is about your personal productivity, Smart Teams, which is about the productive cultures that we talked about, and then Lead Smart is about productivity at the leadership level. So that's kind of been a huge body of work that's probably taken me about 10 years. And in the middle of that, I got frustrated with the amount of urgency in workplaces, so I wrote a book on that as well. So I've kind of finished with the Smart series, I reckon, but when I am ready to write another book, and I guess it might be like having children, whenever I get to an end of a book, I say, never again. I'm never doing that again. But usually about 12 months later, I kind of go, it'd be nice to maybe write something when the time is right. If I was to write another book, I reckon it could be another smart book, but it would be called Smart Teens.
Teens,
Teens, because I really believe that kids need to learn some of this stuff before they've 100%. Even left school. And if 100%. We could teach kids how to plan and how to prioritize and how to schedule their work as they're coming into those HSC years, I reckon that could be my legacy piece. And I'm very inspired by the Barefoot Investor and Scott Pape and everything he's done. But I reckon the best thing he's done is the Barefoot Investor for Families. And he wrote that book in a way that you could sit down with your kids and share these messages with them and get them thinking in a financially savvy way while they're young. That for me is a bit of a template. I would love to do that at some stage.
Well, please do, because I would have liked that book as a teenager instead of having to sort of fail my way forward with all of this productivity piece. It would have definitely helped me a lot, and probably would have learnt more in that book than I did it the whole time I was in school, to be honest, because I don't think school sets you up for success in life. So definitely put that book on your agenda. But Dermot, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. I've come away with a lot of fantastic tips to improve my productivity, and I know that people listening to this will as well. So where can I send people to buy your books, to look into your training, and where do you hang out the most?
Wonderful. Books are available through all the usual online retailers. So Amazon and Booktopia would be two that you would definitely find my books. In the physical form, in Australia, Dymocks and the airport bookstores will often hold the most current ones. So they're readily available. From a website point of view, the name of my business is Adapt Productivity, and the website is adaptproductivity.com.au. that I use. So all the information on the training programs and the different deliveries that we do is all on there. And please feel free to reach out to me if anyone wants to have a talk about any productivity issues or any way that we might be able to help.
Dermot, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure too. Thank you.